Magic Rings and Laser Beams is a Grimaxe Studio production created by sci-fi and fantasy fans for sci-fi and fantasy fans. Your host is Ben Sherman, a scriptwriter and voice talent for Fare and History, a longtime gamer and reader, and has been writing fantasy literature for the past 10 years. He's also known by his very silly username, Poohead189. In this podcast, he interviews popular authors of the science fiction and fantasy genres and speaks on writing, gaming, and movies. You can support this podcast by going to patreon.com/poohead189. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the show.
I wish we could use, mainstream copyrighted music, because I would love to put Disturbed at the beginning of this podcast. I am a utterly helpless Billy Joel fan too, so I would put that up there. Maybe some oldies, other types of oldies music like Jim Croce. Oh well, the Breaking Benjamin or something. I love all kinds of rock, essentially. All right. Hello everyone, and welcome to Magic Rings and Laser Beams. This is the first episode, so I'm not going to be doing the normal stuff, which is sort of weird because you think I'd lay the ground rules, but a lot of the episodes I'm going to be talking about writing, help publishing. I'm going to talk about various different science fiction and fantasy universes. But for right now, I'm going to keep it short and sweet because I have a great interview with William King coming up, who was a delight to talk to. Honestly, I've been emailing him for months, and he's been really personable, and I never actually thought that I would consider one of my favorite authors in my life almost a friend by now, because we talked about 40 minutes even after the interview, just because we could, and that was really refreshing. So, hope you guys enjoy the interview. But I'm going to start this podcast by giving a few little details. First, I want to dedicate the podcast to two people in particular. First off, I'm not going to be very preachy in the podcast, but I am fairly religious, and I wanted to honestly thank God for the podcast, because a lot of stuff fell into place getting this going. I honestly felt like it was divine intervention, so I want to thank him for that. And I also want to dedicate this podcast to my dog, as silly as that sounds, because he passed away about 2 months ago. And despite the fact that he was never a huge science fiction or fantasy fan like me, he was always there for me. I'm 28 years old, at least as far as episode 1 is concerned. And he passed away when he was 14, and we had him when he was a puppy, so he's literally been around half of my life, and it's still kind of difficult going on without him. I do miss Buster a lot. But I just want to dedicate it to both of them, because as I've told people before, this is a labor of love podcast. I'm not really doing this for money. There is a Patreon, but I'll talk about that soon. But first off, let's talk about some fantasy news and science fiction news. As all of you probably know, Obi-Wan, Ewan McGregor is portraying Obi-Wan again, and it will be in a new Star Wars TV series, not the movie that we were all expecting. I absolutely love Ewan McGregor. How come I can't say his name suddenly? Because I've always been able to say his name. I absolutely love Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. However, I'm not too certain about all these new TV series, because I am not certain how I feel about the new Disney streaming service. And I am very critical on Disney Star Wars. I loved Rogue One, and I love Solo, except for maybe two little things in Solo, those two things being Lando Calrissian's robot and Enfys Nest at the very end. But other than them, I love Solo. It should not have gotten the flack it gotten. It got all of The Last Jedi's flack. But other than Solo and Rogue One, I left the theaters, or I wanted to leave the theaters halfway through The Force Awakens, and I didn't even go and see The Last Jedi. I couldn't. I honestly could not. After seeing The Force Awakens, and everything I've read about the extended universe now, I don't really. It just, and they even made Darth Maul not a full Zabrak anymore, apparently, and they gave us peaceful Mandalorians. That's a contradiction, by the way. They don't exist. Mandalorians are not Mandalorians if they are against warfare and combat. You're a Mandalorian if you follow the culture. You can't be a Mandalorian unless you follow that culture. So it's like saying someone is a Nazi when they're not. Well, I guess people do say that sometimes nowadays. Okay, what's a better example? It's like saying, oh yeah, I love computer games, and then you never, ever, ever, ever play them. That's probably a terrible analogy, but you know what I mean. It's an actual culture, the Mandalorian culture. It's about combat and how combat helps you adapt and change to survive. And the whole, there's even a religious aspect about it. Sorry, my nerd is coming up. There's even a religious aspect about it, about how this is how you thrive in a galaxy, by change, and change comes through combat. And it's just, I don't know, I love Mandalorians, and I'm hoping the new Mandalorian show will go well. But just, Disney making a whole planet of peaceful Mandalorians, that's literally not something that exists. Even if they call themselves Mandalorians, they're not. Sorry about that. I'm coming on strong at the beginning of the podcast. But here's hoping that the Obi-Wan TV series and the Mandalorian TV series goes well. Really, really good news. Two things. One, when I gave the interview with William King, which is a few days ago, it was the beginning of World of Warcraft Classic. And I hope everyone is enjoying that. I have not gotten to play it yet because I've always had like 77-minute queues, but tomorrow is Friday, or this will be released, I'll be listening to this on Friday, I suppose. So I'll probably I've made plans on playing then. So I hope that I can do well with my three characters. I have one dwarf named Splat, and he's a dwarf paladin, and the reason why I made him is because I made him back when I was 13 or 14, and I wanted to play him again. I have a night elf cleric, a night elf priest named Spellrond, like Elrond, and then I have a human mage named Karandor, which is actually the only non-meme name I got at the moment. But yeah, I'm looking forward to playing any of them. Probably the dwarf first, just because I love dwarves. Yeah, but the other exciting news is that Lord of the Rings is coming back to theaters, in select theaters, September 1st through the 4th, I believe. In fact, I have it in front of me. Let me see. Yep, September 1st through the 4th. I'm going to go see The Fellowship of the Ring, Extended Edition, in theaters. I'm going to have to drive a ways, but I'm going to do it because I saw Two Towers and The Return of the King in theaters back in the day, but I did not see The Fellowship of the Ring in theaters then. I wish I had, but it's actually kind of funny. I was always a fan of fantasy, but it was mostly through like video games like Legend of Zelda and stuff like that, but I became a huge fan of fantasy when I saw Fellowship of the Ring VHS in my living room. And I had never heard of Lord of the Rings before. I just thought like, hey, this has really good reviews. Of course, an 11-year-old would say that because I was at the time. It was 2002 before Two Towers came out, and I just know it was a really good movie, and so I wanted to watch it, and I did, and it was so long, but at the very end of the movie, Frodo and Sam walk towards Mordor, and the screen fades to black, and I'm like, that's it? My 11-year-old mind and body couldn't handle it. I was jumping on the couch. I was like, how can they end this there? Because I had no idea it was a trilogy. I did not know. I had never heard of Lord of the Rings before. So I was just or I mean, I think I was, oh yeah, my friend from school told me about it, so I had heard of it before technically, but I didn't know what to expect at all, really. Other than, like, there was something about a ring, and, like Sam said, I don't know, something about a ring and a Dark Lord, and something about the end of the world, but please don't hurt me. And I did know, and I did think that Gimli was the last dwarf in Middle-earth, because that's what my friend said, instead of just Moria. So I was just like, oh no, But, I found out that was not true. And then I went and saw Two Towers in theaters. But the point is, I never saw Fellowship of the Ring. And if all of you guys, or some of you guys, didn't see some of the movies in theaters back in the day, you should go and see them now. Because I know I will. And also, something else is exciting that I'm going to be participating in is the Black Library Contest, which is a chance for anyone who is a prospective writer, or who is a writer that wants the chance to join the Black Library. They can now join the Black Library if they win this contest. And it's writing, you'll need to look up the link if I forget to put the link in the description below, but I believe I will put it below. But this editing has taken so long, I'm kind of rushing. But what it says right here is what you'll need to do. It's open, starts August 26th, so it's already started. And it goes to the 23rd of September, although you don't need to do too much. All you gotta do is write down character bios describing your group's key members, a 1-paragraph summary of a story featuring the group, and a 500-word sample of the story, which showcases your writing talents. And it's for the 40K universe, or Age of Sigmar. So yeah, best of luck. I probably shouldn't have said that because I don't want more competition, but hey, I mean, if I'm not worth it, then I'm not worth it. And I'll take it like that. And that brings me to something else. This podcast is supposed to be a very honest podcast. And I'm going to talk about Patreon for a second. I do have Patreon, and it's mostly to help me continue doing this, but it's partly that, but it's mostly for making sure that I can afford a season 2. Because I plan on doing 10 episodes, and I have 5 guests ready. But if you enjoy these episodes, then please donate and help our cause. However, there are 2 things. I don't want this podcast to be politicized in any way, and I don't accept advertisement money from anybody, because I only want to advertise the things that I think are worth advertising. However, despite the fact that I said that I don't want to politicize anything, this is my fucking podcast. I'm going to say one thing, and that is the Amazon is burning. And that also leaves me to try to help it in some way. And so what I'm going to do is, if you would like to, and I almost, and I encourage you to do this, if you would like to, and if you want the full benefits of the Patreon account, which is giving me advice on what authors or books I should read next, so I could, see what another guest is going to be, or who I should add in season 2, and various things like that. And also I'll name your name in the episodes as well. If you would like to instead donate to any cause that helps the Amazon rainforest, and screenshot yourself donating to them, $5 or more, then you will get the podcast benefits. You just send that to me and then give me your email. And also there's one other thing. If you would also like to donate to one of my friends' GoFundMes, because my friend is very sick and they really need some funds. So if you can donate to that also, or, if you want to donate to that instead of the Patreon or the Amazon rainforest, send me a screenshot of that, you doing that again, and as long as they confirm that they got the amount of money that you posted that you got, and send me your email, you will also be on the Patreon list as well, or you'll get the full benefits. So it's Patreon, Amazon rainforest relief, or my friend's GoFundMe. All right, thank you. Okay. You know what I would really love? I would really love to have Glenn Cook on the podcast, because I have his Black Company trilogy, but I don't have any time to read it. And I would love... One, I know I'd love it. I've always heard great things about it, and I love the down-on-your-luck mercenary, fantasy mercenary kind of thing. So I want to read it, but with all these guests, I don't have time. And you'll find out that I want to read some Conan stories later as well. But if anyone has any way to contact Glenn Cook at all, you let me know so I can contact him. Because I would absolutely love to, one, have him as a guest, and two, read his first 3 books before I do it. And last but not least, I'm going to do a few little things on advertising. As I said before, I'm not advertising anything that anyone's paying me to do. I'm only doing stuff that I enjoy. Stuff that I think deserves advertising. The first is the Dungeon Cast, which is run by 2 guys named Will and Brian. They're acquaintances of mine. I was on their episode for Dritz Doerden, talking about the eponymous hero in the Forgotten Realms setting. And, you know, the reason why I got on there is because I absolutely love their podcast in general. And I volunteered because I'm in Faerun History. And that is a YouTube group that chronicles a lot of the history of the Forgotten Realms. And, you know, they'd heard of us, and we obviously heard of them, and I volunteered. I said, like, yeah, hey, you know, if you need any Forgotten Realms help, I'm around, and they needed help with Dritz. And I thought, sure. And since then, they've actually, it got the attention of R.A. Salvatore, and so he jumped on, and they also had an interview with him. But yeah, I want to advertise the Dungeon Cast because they do very well at what they, like, it's hard for me to enjoy a podcast, really, despite the fact that I have one now. I only listen to very few, but theirs is one of them. They have a lot of great Dungeons & Dragons lore, and I highly recommend it. I also recommend for any of you history nerds out there, because I majored in history in college, there's Scala Gladiatoria, run by Matt Easton, who is a HEMA trainer and someone who specializes in history and weaponry. And I fell in love with this channel a few years ago, and it helped me get into a lot of various things in history that I had forgotten about. And, you know, I read a lot of Herodotus and Thucydides, and, you know, I'm familiar with William of Tyre. And since then, it's safe to say that he didn't get me into history, and I read a lot of primary sources, and I'm very big on history, but I'm probably going to talk about history some more in later episodes before the interviews, in little segments, like I will with writing. However, Scala Gladiatoria, Matt Easton knows more about history than I probably ever will, even if it is a big interest of mine. So definitely check out his channel, which is called Scala Gladiatoria. But you can just type in Matt Easton and you'll see his channel likely. And last but not least, Overly Sarcastic Productions, or OSP, run by 2 people, Red and Blue. Blue does history stuff, and Red does tropes and various stories and sagas and stuff like that. And they're a really neat team, and they're pretty funny, and I enjoy their work as well. All right, then. I think that's a good good first monologue, not inner monologue. That's a good first monologue for the first episode. I like it. All right, then. Okay, guys, introducing one of my writing icons and the man who wrote the Gotrek and Felix series, the new Illidan book, or newish Illidan book, and he's writing a lot of great new material now. William King. I want to begin by saying that while you've only known me for a short time, you've affected my life quite a bit in my writing and my interests, and also in this podcast, because you being here and you being open to coming on the show encouraged me to keep going with this kind of labor of love. And I now have 5 guests ready, and I did just record with somebody yesterday, so I want to thank you for that a lot.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. But most importantly, you got me into the Warhammer world with your books. I think it was around 2005, and I was looking for something other than the Forgotten Realms books to read. and I stumbled on Gotrek and Felix, and since then I've probably read the series like 7 times now. I read it I think once a year in school, like I read The Hobbit once a year in school as well. And to be honest, I almost didn't script the episode because I remember this story so well, actually. But if
probably you remember them better than me, let's be honest.
But would you introduce yourself for the listeners who are unfamiliar with your work?
Oh, my name's Bill King. I'm a writer and former games developer at Games Workshop, which was a very long time ago now. I have written, I think, 18 Warhammer or Warhammer-related novels. I wrote Illidan for World of Warcraft, and I've written a bunch of indie novels, which I've self-published. I've also ghostwritten some books, which I'm not allowed to talk about, so I won't. I'm not even sure why I mentioned that now. Yeah, that's me.
All right, then. Before we delve into your Black Library stuff, how did you begin your writing career? And also, after that, how did you get into the Black Library to begin with?
Oh, it's... you're going back into ancient history there. Back in the 80s, I was a cyberpunk. Yeah, I was into it before it was cool, obviously, with a new cyberpunk game coming out next year, hopefully. So my first couple of stories were cyberpunk stories. They were published in Interzone and Zenith, which was a collection of short stories in the UK. And as fate would have it, David Pringle was the editor of Interzone, and he got a job as the editor of GW Books, which was the long ago forerunner of Black Library. This would have been about 1988 or 89. At the time, I played a lot of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, like a lot of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And my first Gotrek and Felix story, in fact, was based on a scenario I ran in Edinburgh in about 1986. Anyway, I digressed, as I always do, and which I will undoubtedly demonstrate a huge tendency to do during the course of our conversation. But anyway, I wrote to David saying, look, I play these games. I hear you've got this job. I know the background really well, and I think I could write these stories. Please employ me. And God bless him, he did. So I wrote the first Gotrek and Felix story for David Pringle. That would be about 1988, I think. And from there, it was a short hop to actually working at Games Workshop. I was in Nottingham for a science fiction convention, and I recognised Brian Ansell, who then was the owner of Games Workshop, in the dealer's room buying a book. And since I'd been writing the stories for him, I walked over and said, "Are you Brian Ansell?" And he looked at me kind of suspiciously, really, because complete stranger approaching him in a book room. And he said, "Yes, I am." I said, "I've been writing some short stories for you." And we got to talking, and he said, "Oh yeah, Gotrek and Felix, I liked that story. Would you like a job?" And so, yeah, I said, yeah. So I stayed over the weekend after the convention and had a job interview on the Monday, and I think I started work a few weeks later, moved down from Scotland. And that's basically the story of how I got involved with writing Warhammer stories. After that, I was working on, I think, Realms of Chaos was the first project I worked on, writing, the little pieces of fiction that go inside the books. Yeah. And then Codex Titanicus, and yeah, lots of projects that most people have probably forgotten about now, it has to be said, but which you can still find here and there.
I absolutely love going through the old Army books and the role player guides, and also particularly the Warhammer 40k guidebooks as well. But because I have a comic book store that's right around here that has a lot of the old ones, and I've been saving up money to get those. Hope I can get a lot more very soon.
Well, I picked up a copy of the second Realms of Chaos book at one of the Black Library events a few years back. I was very pleased about that because I didn't actually have a copy of it back in the day. Really? Yeah, I don't know how I failed to pick it up because I had the first one. You would think I would have kept a copy of the first book I ever worked on at Games Workshop, but somehow I didn't. But I have it now. It's a very different style from modern stuff, just in terms of layout. You know, like the stuff from the 80s and early 90s has a enormous density on the page, you know, just the small text, those square layout boxes, the hyper detailed art by, you know, people like Adrian Smith and John Blanche. I mean, they have a very, very distinctive look. Lots and lots of tables is the other thing that strikes me. You know, random tables for doing this and that. And there was the sort of crossover between the role-playing stuff and the miniature stuff back then, which you don't really see these days.
No. It reminds me of the Tales of the Old World, because I don't own that one, but I do own Tales of the Old World, but I don't own the Realms of Chaos, but I've thumbed through it a bit, and I think they probably look very similar to each other, with this very small texts. But let's see, did you write any other, before we get into Troll Slayer, did you write, what other short stories did you write for Black Library, or do you know what they were included in other than Realms of Chaos?
Well, most of the color text that I wrote was never included in any of the fictional books. It's just there in the back. It's there in the army books. It's there in the things like Realms of Chaos, basically. I think one piece of text that I wrote for Advanced Space Crusade eventually found its way into one of Black Library's books a few years ago, which was a real blast from the past, because I think I wrote it in 1992, which, whenever it was that Advanced Space Crusade came out, I wrote it back then. So, of course, it was kind of put out as a historical piece. There were a few sort of discrepancies in the background, but yeah, that's exactly what you'd expect from something that predates a lot of the actual background being written, because I think that was before even the Space Wolf Army book. I should know that because I actually worked on the first Space Wolf Army book. But I actually, I'm getting old and my memory is not good on the details here. So, but the stories that appear in Troll Slayer were actually originally written in the 80s for GW books like Geheimnisnacht, Wolf Riders, The Dark Beneath the World. I think I wrote those in 88, 89, 90, and they appeared in the first short story collections that GW Books brought out back then, and then they were collected and reprinted with some stories from Inferno, and some unpublished short stories I'd written for GW Books before it went out of business back in the early 90s. That's actually how Troll Slayer was put together, from those sort of collected short stories, and the linking sections were there to make it seem as if there was a coherent narrative, which there sort of is now, but
So, after you wrote the first short story, you weren't commissioned to continue with Troll Slayer, you just did it over different parts of those few years, and they just added them together?
Well, I mean, this is it. I mean, those short stories were, like I said, they were written in the late 80s, early 90s. Then there was a kind of hiatus with GW's fiction publishing through most of the 90s. And then sometime, it must have been about 1998, Andy Jones approached me to write some more stuff because they said they were going to start publishing fiction again. And they wanted me aboard, and they wanted some Gotrek and Felix books. I believe I was commissioned to write 3 of them. But Troll Slayer was the first, which was basically just collecting the short stories that had been already written together. Right. Then there was Skaven Slayer and Demon Slayer. One of the weird things is that Demon Slayer was written before Skaven Slayer, or at least large chunks of Skaven Slayer, but they were published in a different order because of the exigencies, is that the word, of publishing? But because Skaven Slayer was actually built up from a couple of short stories I'd written in the early 90s, and I thought would make the core of an interesting book, which is why it has the kind of strange structure that it has. You know, it's like a little novella. Each novella, it's a collection of novellas, each novella dealing with one Skaven clan, really.
Yeah, because you can tell with the attack on the gun armory and the different things that. Yeah, I can see what you mean by that. Okay.
So I mean that's partially because the structure grew out the fact that there was already a couple of novellas existing, and I just went with that. Demon Slayer was really the book I brooded on through the 90s, because when GW Books went out of business, Gotrek and Felix seemed to be lost forever, and I kind of brooded on what I would do with them if I ever got the chance to write another book. And it was actually Demon Slayer was intended to be like the ultimate Gotrek and Felix story, basically. Just in case Black Library didn't succeed, basically, I thought I'd get all my stuff down at the time. But as we know, Black Library was an enormous success, and Gotrek and Felix went on and on and on. But it's also why, the sort of slaying career kind of peaks early in terms of the power of the monsters that he fights, certainly that I was writing. Because at the time I was writing, I thought this might be the only Gotrek and Felix novel I'll ever get the chance to write. So, everything goes in, chaos, demons, and of course Demon Slayer was the kind of peak career in the role-playing game. In the first edition, at least, I think it went Troll Slayer, Giant Slayer, Demon Slayer, with the career paths. So that was kind of the level of planning that I went in for with these things back in the day.
That makes sense, because it's hard to beat fighting a greater demon of Khorne. Let's see. I heard from, I think it was the other podcast, I might have gotten it incorrect. I heard that you had expected Gotrek to die in your first short story.
Oh no! I actually wrote it that way. It was Geheimnisnacht, and you can actually, if you look closely, you can actually see where I killed him. He goes down under a pile of bodies. My original plan was for Gotrek to meet his heroic death and for Felix to go off and tell the tale. But by this stage, I thought these are really good characters, and if I'm smart, I can get a series out of this. So, what madness is this, killing him off? So, it turned out my instincts were correct in that as well. So, he went on to become like the least successful slayer in the history of the world, basically. No matter how hard he tries for these heroic dooms.
He's faced about everything now. Let's see, how did you come with the inspiration to get Gotrek and Felix? Were they two characters in your game?
Well, it was because one of my players was a really big Slayer player in the role-playing campaign that I ran, and Slayers were the most popular sort of character types with everybody. If you look at the old role-playing game, it's full of brilliant stuff, like lots and lots of little incidental detail, lots of brilliant character types, but even amongst things like, the rat catcher, Slayers really stand out, like punk suicidal dwarves, like visually, I mean, it's just an unforgettable concept, at least as far as I'm concerned. So when I was sort of like, had the job of writing fiction set in the Warhammer world, there was never any doubt in my mind that that's what I was going to go for. Felix came about for lots of reasons, actually. One was I wanted somebody to kind of interpret the dwarvish mentality for human readers, because I wasn't entirely sure I could portray an alien mindset, because dwarves are kind of alien in some ways. And I wanted, you could see him through Felix's eyes, and it was also a way of preserving the mystery of the character. There's lots of questions asked, how did he become a Slayer, blah da 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 da, and so on, and this was a way of like avoiding having to deal with those before I thought them through at the time. So and also he was a good contrast, I thought, to Gotrek, and he was a sort of good way of seeing the world, through the eyes of somebody who had every reason to be scared. If you look at the world through Gotrek's eyes, even the Warhammer world it's not that intimidating, basically. It's like, oh look, plenty of things that might kill me goody.
Yeah,
But
good.
yeah, Felix actually wants to stay alive, and he's somebody you can kind of worry about and identify with, because he's basically dragged into, at least in the beginning, he's basically dragged into all these really horrifying adventures, which for him are genuinely horrifying adventures, whereas for Gotrek, they're kind of like, yeah, all in a day's work, basically. So, I mean, from a dramatic point of view, I think, yeah, he served a really good purpose. And, yeah, I like the character as well. And he gets to say and do all the stuff that Gotrek doesn't get to say and do, because, yeah, Gotrek's basically a surly, miserable bastard. So it's like, so, yeah, there's a bit of light and shadow there. So, yep, I think that's my answer. Yeah.
I do remember in one short story, I forgot the name of it. It was the one with when you introduced the cat, the little child.
Yeah.
And when the villagers were fighting the beastmen, I think Felix was asking Gotrek if he was really scared, and Gotrek was just like, everyone's afraid, but like, I don't let it get to me. Or something along those lines.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the other thing with Gotrek, is that, yeah, he's not as indestructibly brave as he pretends to be. He's just enormously strong-willed. Yeah, like in situations where, yeah, certainly I would run screaming in the other direction. Gotrek just, yeah, mans up and moves forward, or dwarfs up is probably a better expression there, and yeah, moves forward, basically. It's also, he has a very strong motivation, you know, he's looking for his doom, so yeah, he can, yeah, it can keep him going in situations where, you know, like I said, I would run away.
How did you come up with the, I think it was, I hate boats almost as much as I hate trees, and I hate trees almost as much as I hate elves.
Well, the strange thing, I mean, the odd thing about Gotrek is he's partially based on my grandfather, who was quite a miserable man in his way as well. He was a very dour Scottish sort of hard man, basically, and it's kind of just the way he talked in many ways. It's also, I mean, it does actually sound funny to me when he says things like that. You know, it's like he has no filter about any of this stuff, basically, and he's not scared to let you know what he thinks, basically, which I think is one of the attractive things about the character.
Oh yeah.
He's also kind of deadpanly funny occasionally, and quite intentionally so. But because he's Gotrek, nobody actually understands that he's joking, so it just goes over everybody's head. Because you never know whether to take him seriously or not.
Except for Felix.
You always take him seriously because he's got a bloody great
accent. Oh, right, yeah.
He's not afraid to use it if you annoy him. So, yeah.
No, you're good. There was also this one thing that I've always remembered over these years was the I think it was in Demon Slayer when they were flying over the Chaos Wastes and they saw this ancient grand city, and I think Felix said something along the lines of, "No men can build this city this big, and doesn't look like elvish work." And I remember exactly what Gotrek said, which was a contradiction in terms. Elves don't work. Which, as a dwarf fan, I always absolutely loved.
Well, he was just venting dwarvish prejudices there, so it was. Which, yeah, he's kind of in the habit of doing. I mean, most of what he says is basically very aggressive and disparaging, and it kind of establishes his personality. And yeah,
of course. And I also remember about your grandfather. I think you said that you always imagined that he sounded like him as well.
Yeah, that was one of the weirdest experiences of my life. Actually, I was playing Shadow of the Horned Rat, which nobody had actually told me Gotrek was in, and he appears in one of the scenarios, and he starts talking to you, as part of the scenario, and I thought, he doesn't sound like my grandfather. I think he sounded as if he was from Yorkshire, and I always imagined that he sounded sort of like, my grandfather with a Scottish accent, which, apparently is the cliche for dwarves these days, it has to be said, so, ahead of my time, again.
It is in Warcraft, yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, in my mind, all dwarves always sounded Scottish, but then in my mind, almost everybody sounds Scottish, so it's hardly surprising. But he sounded like a particularly aggressive, somewhat drunken Scotsman, picking a fight with you in a bar quite a lot of the time.
It sounded like you had a lot of fun with him and Felix, but you also probably had a lot of fun with the Skaven and Thancool.
Did you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, Thancool's quite possibly my favourite character in that entire series, I have to say, because he's basically me. Well, let me rephrase that. He's basically me as I am when I'm playing war games. Like when I win, it's because of my great genius. When I fail, it's because of the incompetence of my minions or just pure bad luck, basically. I mean, we've all played against people who are like that, and sadly, I'm one of those people. So basically, I just took the worst aspects of my wargaming persona and amplified them. And I admit it, I find Gracie Thankful very funny because he's so overreaching. It's like he has this vast ego, which is almost but not quite justified. He's almost as great a sorcerer as he thinks he is. He's almost as clever as he thinks he is, but he always just pushes it that bit too far. And of course, it's never his fault, which is just, I just find it really entertaining. I mean, half the fun of Gracie Thankful was always finding the excuses and justifications for why things went wrong with his brilliant scheme. I mean, he's also, let's face it, he's a sort of kiddies cartoon villain in many ways. Like he's. Sure. I would have got away with it if it wasn't for you middling kids. The nicest thing about the Skaven and Thanquol was that they just came together for me with that, because I can even remember the moment it happened. I was writing this scene where he's there and the people are looking at him and, oh, it's a giant rat, they're kind of horrified and disgusted, and he thinks, but the scene's seen from his point of view, and he's thinking that they're cringing in terror before his sheer awesomeness. And at that moment, I just thought, yes, I love this character. He's like, he so completely misinterprets everything that's going on round about him in a way that reflects his own vast ego. And I just thought, he just made me laugh, basically. So I got accused of smuggling him into every book thereafter. Quite justifiably so, because, I was smuggling him into every book thereafter. But he was a great running villain as well, And, I think people were always pleased to see him because he was quite entertaining. He was certainly really entertaining to write.
Because he has been in a lot of stuff after, so you were the one that did create him?
Afraid so, yep.
I'd be proud about that.
After all, I just said about him being my alter ego.
Of course, yeah.
I can hardly escape that, can I? It's like him.
But also, I think the sheer awesomeness, that was at the end of Skaven Slayer, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it's where it's onwards, my brave storm vermin to inevitable victory, he cries as he's making for the door. Which it's just the perfect Thankful line as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, let's see. What made you add Ulrika as a central character, and Maximilian?
Accident. It was always accident with everything I did, and all the series I wrote for Black Library and Games Workshop. It was, they appeared, they tagged along, they became part of the ongoing story. I have no idea why any of this stuff happened. There was no master plan. It just, one book led to another. Events took on a momentum of their own. People stuck around because they were amusing, or I liked them, or I felt there was something that they could do to advance the story, or It basically, one scene led to another, one book led to another, and it just rolled on, basically. I wish I could say I had some vast overarching plan to the stuff I wrote, but I never did. I was just making it up as I went along.
This is somewhat spoilerish for those who haven't read the books, but it's something I always wanted to know. If you planned this or not, why did you have Ulrika ultimately become a vampire at the end of Vampire Slayer?
Again, see my previous answer.
Yeah.
It just happened. It seemed like a kind of logical outgrowth of the story that was going on. And it was also, I think, partially, if you want a kind of more technical look at it, it was possibly, I have to dig deep into my memory here, but there was a chance that she and Felix might have settled down. And if you've got an ongoing action-adventure series called Gotrek and Felix, having one of your main characters, get married, go off and have children or whatever, it's, gonna put the brakes on the series. So I think that might have been in my mind at the time as well. I'm not entirely sure. I could be making that up as well, but I suspect that was in there somewhere. it was a way of like damping down the relationship and moving events on basically. So
It was also probably dark enough for a Black Library book as well. Let's see. I also loved the how do I put this? The kind of pack of slayers in the second omnibus with let's see, with Steg, Grim, Snorri, Uli, Bjorni. Did you have let's see. I think you also had a lot of fun writing for Snorri Nosebiter as well.
Yeah, no. He was another favourite actually. He came from a throwaway line somewhere. Like I think in a short story I wrote, which may have not been published or even finished, I had Gotrek wake up one morning with a hangover and say something like, my head hasn't felt this bad since I lost a headbutting contest with Snorri Nosebiter. And I mean, that tells you all you need to know about a character there. Like Gotrek had lost a headbutting contest to him. So, and I think that was the genesis of that particular character. Again, we're delving very, very deep into the past here. So, but yeah, the dwarves. I mean, it was multiple dumb literary jokes. That one actually, it was 7 dwarves, magnificent seven dwarves.
Right.
With Gotrek playing the Yul Brynner part basically, and so I mean, and I think there was a bit of a parody of the Hobbit thrown into that one as well, if I remember rightly. It had the Battle of 5 Armies at the end.
They were going to attack a dragon, and there were 2 armies outside fighting as well. So that makes sense.
Yeah. I think I went overboard with my literary references in that one.
I mean, I didn't notice it till now, but I always quite enjoyed it. Let's see. Now, I read your first book when it came to the Tyrion and Teclis series, but if you come on next time, we'll talk more in depth on that. But how was it for writing Teclis and Giant Slayer before you began writing those books?
Well, it was. I'm sorry, the pause there is the gears turning in my brain.
Oh, you're fine. Don't worry.
Draw back my memories of this period. I actually worked on Tyrion and Teclis back when they were miniatures.
Really?
For one of this. Yeah. When I worked on the first High Elf Army book a long, long time ago, sometime in the early 90s. Don't ask me exactly when.
Right.
And I was actually given the job of making them suitably epic, because they were going to be very expensive miniatures. They were, I think, possibly the first really expensive single character miniatures that were done for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and so they had to have this hugely epic backstory. And basically I wrote some stuff and came back not epic enough, and I wrote something else and it came back not epic enough. And so I thought, okay then, I'll give you bloody epic. It's like, so I went off and wrote what was basically the outline of this fantasy trilogy about them. I thought they'll never ask me to write anything more about these elves after that once I did it. So that's where their backstory came from. I wrote this enormous backstory, and they published all of it, which really surprised me, I have to say. But so that's where the characters. So I had a big attachment to them, because I think the High Elf Army book might have been the first real army book I worked on as an actual developer. Could be contradicting myself there again, but that is my memory of it at the moment.
So you wrote the Tyrion and Teclis books far before they were published?
No. I wrote the outline.
Okay, gotcha.
Backstory, but it gets even weirder, which we might get to at some point. But so anyway, to get back to their encounter with Gotrek and Felix, again, I cannot remember for the life of me why Teclis appeared in those books. I really can't. I mean, if there was any logic to it, it's eluding me at the moment. It's just that he was a character I liked, and I thought putting Gotrek together with an elf would be entertaining, to say the least. That may have been the entirety of my reasoning as far as plotting was concerned, it has to be said. I mean, I might have thought, I'll put Gotrek together with an elf and we'll see what happens then. But obviously it had to be an elf who could stand up to him.
Right.
If it was Tyrion, it would probably have ended up in a big fight.
Probably.
But yeah, like Teclis is intelligent enough to not fight with Gotrek, and B, it's it wouldn't be a sort of sword fight between master warriors. It would be, I'm going to run away and throw spells at you from a great distance if I really have to, sort of fight, which, both of them could justifiably survive, because at that point, both characters were a big part of the sort of old world mythos. Like Gotrek and Felix had sort of found their way into lots and lots of different places, including being miniatures, and Teclis started life as one of the big miniature heroes, basically. So it wasn't like I was going to be given permission to kill either of them, so I had to have characters who could survive the encounter and yet still spark off each other. And that, I think, may also have been part of my reasoning there, because also Teclis is kind of sneery enough to exchange sneers with Gotrek, basically. So he's bad-tempered enough in his own kind of intellectual way. So
I think they were both kind of insulting each other. I think Felix stepped in and was just like, he showed his own prejudices toward both of them, I think. I forgot the exact lines. Something I do recall is I think Gotrek said, like, if Teclis betrayed them, he'd crawl out of hell and drag him down with him or something like that.
That's sort of a polite chit chat for Gotrek.
Yeah, that's just regular.
He probably says that if you went for coffee with him, he'd probably say something like that. Yeah. Probably say it to the barista if he didn't like his coffee. Let's face it. Not that that's a likely scenario, really, is it?
No. Let's see. Now let's go to your 40K work with the little sci-fi aspect of this with Ragnar and the Space Wolves. So you said you worked on the first...
I worked on the Space Wolf Army book, yeah. That's where that comes from. When Black Library was being started, they wanted a Space Marine book, basically. And they asked me to write it. So I picked Space Wolves because I actually had worked on the Army book, and because I liked the Space Wolves, basically. In general, I'm not a huge fan of Space Marines. It has to be said, I kind of find the whole For the Emperor thing a bit dull. I know that's heresy, but yeah, I'm a heretic. So, yes, chaos for me, lads. Down with the false Emperor. So I thought, if I'm going to write about Space Marines, Space Wolves is what I want to write about. So that's how it got started.
And you're obviously, from what I could tell, you're a fan of Norse mythology and Viking history as well, because I do know I am too, and I noticed that the Cormac saga, and we'll talk about it later, but isn't it named after an Old Norse poem?
Apparently, I actually was kind of riffing on Robert E. Howard's Cormac McCart at the time.
Really?
In some cases, so that the name looked different. But yeah, when I did a search for it, that turned up. I actually did spend a lot of time reading Norse mythology when I was younger. Mm-hmm. I was a huge fan of it, and I have some sagas on my bookshelf still, which has not stopped me from making lots of mistakes about the mythology, certainly in the Space Wolves books, as people have been kind enough to write in and point out from time to time. But yeah, I did. That was one of the reasons I picked the Space Wolves, basically.
Let's see, I also remember there was a few things, like I haven't read those books in quite a while, but there were two things that I recall, and one of them was the really interesting aspect of, I think his name is Strybjorn Grimskull, who I think killed Ragnar's father, and they had become friends and allies in the Space Wolf chapter.
Yeah, I think you're really digging back into history there. It's been a long time since I wrote that, and a very long time since I read it. But yeah, I think that may be correct. I mean, yeah, that tells you how vague I am on the subject. I don't really remember very much about this at all, I have to say. I do recall that he had a rival in training.
That must have been him.
Yep, I think that must have been him, because I went for the whole Top Gun thing there. So yeah, sorry, but that's where it was. Yeah, it's Maverick and Iceman. But it was So, yeah.
Okay, and you probably had a lot of fun with Fenris, because it kind of reminds me of the Old World's Norska a bit.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was, one of the things about 40K back in the day was it's a galaxy, so you could you had a bit more room to play with things. that also because there weren't very many books, there wasn't a huge amount of background. You could kind of fill in the dots and say the sort of stuff that you wanted. So I just threw in a whole bunch of stuff from that's from Norska and from Viking stuff, and from some trips I'd made to the mountains. Actually, I was camping in the High Tatras, the Carpathians as they're also known as, and I can remember looking at the mountains there. It was round about the time I was writing the books, and just using the descriptions of the scenery basically and dropping them into the books, which was something I used to do with monotonous regularity back in the day. I mean, a lot of stuff that's in all of Warhammer books is stuff that happened on my holidays. Not that I was fighting orcs, but like the landscapes and bits of business and stuff like that.
All right, that makes sense, because I do remember giant wolves, and I think there was even a fantasy-esque troll that they had to fight for, like an induction into the space wolves.
That's right. Yep, it's all coming back to me now. I'm sorry, I mean, a lot of this stuff is a pure blank. I should also mention the fact that I'm on painkillers at the moment because of my knee, but which may also make me even more slow-witted than usual. So,
you're fine. Was that from kayaking or?
No, I mean, I'm now old, and just odd things happen, basically. I was walking along and I felt this click in my knee, and it's been painful ever since. I did lose a toenail kayaking recently, but came out in some rapids, and there was a lot of rocks underfoot, and when I got out of the water, I had a toenail missing, so I'm not entirely sure how it happened, but it did happen.
Same thing happened to me at my brother's wedding party. He actually wanted to go to the rapids, and I bought some water shoes, and 10 minutes in I fell off and lost them. They slipped off my feet.
These ones weren't terribly terrifying. There was a bit of current and a lot of stones which were very rounded, I think, from being battered against each other, and they were quite slippery. And I think what happened is I tumbled, and my foot must have caught on something or something. But again, in really cold water, you don't actually feel anything till you get out, basically. So I didn't notice at the time. So this is sort of detail I'll probably throw into a story in the not too distant future, though. So Cormac loses a toenail, you know where that one came from. But
Okay, let's see. Let's talk about Warcraft. I spoke about that with you a bit on the email, but I wanted to know, one, how you started playing Warcraft, and let's just start with that, because I have several questions. But
I started playing Warcraft back in the 90s with a real-time strategy game, and I just loved it, basically. Like the characters, the humor, all that stuff. And then I started playing the MMO, must have been sometime around Burning Crusade, I think, because my brother was playing it. And that surprised me at the time because he was a truck driver. A taxi driver. I apologize. My father was a taxi driver. Sorry, Eddie. And a nightclub bouncer. And it wasn't the sort of game that normally, I would have expected him to play. But he and many of his friends played. Some of whom were truck drivers. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And it was getting a lot of publicity. And I'd not played any MMOs. So I knew the world and I was interested, so I started playing, and of course, I dropped off the face of the earth for a few years playing World of Warcraft. Basically, is what happened.
Did you start at Warcraft 3?
I started with the one that had Tides of Darkness, which might have been Warcraft 2.
Yeah, that would be 2.
I started playing with. I actually played Warcraft 1, but you're going a long way back then. But Warcraft. The one with Tides of Darkness was the one where I really got into it. Then there was Warcraft 3, which took things to a new level, I thought, and where my love of Illidan really comes from, it has to be said. And then the actual MMO was basically an alternate life for me for several years. I put in more hours in World of Warcraft than I did in any job I've ever had, quite frankly.
Me too.
Being a writer. I shudder to think how many hours I logged in World of Warcraft. But it stood me in good stead eventually. As I explained to my wife, it was all research for my future World of Warcraft novel. Yeah, that one didn't fly, but I thought I'd try it anyway. But yeah, no, I mean, I was a huge fan of World of Warcraft.
I was young enough to think that it'd be a Warcraft 4, and so when I became this dwarf in Dunmara, I was like, where's the armies? But I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much to love in the MMO, like Ironforge, for example. You know, like they said, speaking of dwarf cities, there's a dwarf city.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, I mean, Wrath of the Lich King came along, and that just blew my mind, basically. That's how I got involved in it. I mean, how I actually got involved in writing the books is they got in touch with me, basically, and asked me if I'd like to write a book.
Really?
I said yes. Yeah. And it was about Illidan, which, honestly, that was a dream project. You know, if I had to pick one World of Warcraft character to write about, it was Illidan. And so I was utterly happy. And yeah, I should also mention that I played World of Warcraft with my oldest son, Dan. And of course, it made me look like really cool dad at that point as well. Basically, it has to be said, which was a huge plus. Right. So we went to BlizzCon together and watched the World PvP Championships at the time, because we used to do arenas and things together. Okay, let me rephrase that. He used to carry me through arena fights. It's probably a better description of how that one worked. Yeah, I mean, World of Warcraft was my hobby for probably 10 years. Probably my sole hobby for 10 years when I think about it. I think I've said enough about my addiction. No. Spell, and I'm addicted to World of Warcraft. But
I can relate, definitely. Are you going to play Classic?
I might. I've not been playing for a while now, and I don't really want to get sucked back in because I've got this spinal problem. Yeah, this is the hard thing about getting old. Yeah, it's neck compression. So if I sit hunched over a computer too long, I get vertigo. And since I need computer time to actually do my job, playing computer games for long hours is no longer a great idea for me. It's really, really sad because it was one of my great pleasures. So I'm not saying I won't get sucked in again, because there's probably a strong likelihood that I will. But you're placing temptation in front of me here. It's I'd like to say I won't play, but it's possible that I will. My brain is now moving to thinking about World of Warcraft here. Let's get off that track.
Sorry about that. Let's see. I just had to ask because today was when it comes out. Let's see. Sorry. Okay, let's go to your Illidan book. You did a really good job writing for Illidan, because you made him seem like what he is, which is a misunderstood kind of, not a mad scientist, but kind of like very like vain in his own power, but he's doing it for the good of everyone, sort of. And he also kind of experiments a lot in the book as well. He's kind of convinced of his own morality and heroism when no one else is. Yeah.
Well, he's kind of like a brave Skaven, actually, in some ways. Sorry about that.
No,
He's very egotistical. I mean, my take on Illidan, which I hope comes across in the book, is that he's kind of a very bad character in a lot of ways, but with good reasons. And by that, I mean he has some justification for his stances, like the way he's been treated by his own kin, for example. Yeah. And on top of which, he's actually trying to save the world, while all his motives are being completely misinterpreted in the worst possible way, possibly because he's given people good reason to misinterpret them. Let's never lose sight of that.
Yeah.
He's a pretty dark character, Illidan. And he is enormously intelligent. I mean, one of the ways I tried to write him is he's like the smartest guy in the room, basically, as he sees himself, and he's always right. even when he's wrong, he's always right. And so he has this vast ego, which is it's what makes him what he is. I mean, he couldn't survive the things he's had to survive if he didn't have that huge self-belief, vast ego, grim determination, whatever you're going to call it.
And if he wasn't also competent himself as well. Like, if he didn't prove that to himself sometimes as well, because he is really good at what he does.
Yes, indeed he is. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, and he actually is quite genuinely trying to save the world. And it really pisses him off that, he has to put up with these other people criticizing him all the time and getting in the way of his great plans and some of all those other things that a Skaven would say under the circumstances.
True.
Sorry, I'm mixing intellectual properties here, but and I should be doing.
No, I could see the similarities.
But I mean, he's kind of I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say he's a hero because he does heroic things. I don't think he's a hero in the classical sense. I think his struggle against all the things that are set against him is kind of a definition of heroism in some ways. But I also do think he's quite a bad person.
Yeah.
There's a lot of darkness in him, which he is very good at justifying. So he's a fascinating character, I hope. And I hope I did him justice in that particular book. Because it was a pleasure to write.
I think so, because I didn't know what to expect. Because Illidan, he is touched on quite a bit in the games, but at the same time, you still never actually get to see inside his head much.
Well, I think part of what happened there was I was actually flown out to California to talk to the people in Irvine, and a lot of what was happening with Legion, I think, was kind of retconning some of Illidan's stuff. I'm not sure that's the best way of putting it, but it was kind of inverting what people thought of him. It was actually to show the Illidanish point of view, basically, for those of us who had massacred our way through his forces in the Burning Crusade, for example, as indeed I did. But it was an attempt to kind of rehabilitate him, and I think also to put him kind of stage center in some ways. I can't speak for the people in Irvine, obviously. I can just go with what they told me and what I kind of put in from my own side, basically. But so I kind of lost the thread of what I was going to say there.
No, that's fine. I mean, concerning looking inside people's minds as well, something I want to point out is I love the way you wrote Maeve's Shadow Song, because I'm not going to say anything wrong about her character in Frozen Throne or in World of Warcraft, but her obsession with taking down Illidan always made her seem sort of one-dimensional to me, at least with some of the cutscenes. But in the book, you gave her quite a bit of characterization while also making her seem completely single-minded when it came to her task.
Well, that was the thing. I actually got some criticism from Maiev fans about that because they thought I didn't do her justice.
Really?
The only thing I can really say there is I kind of agree. Well, the thing is, Maiev the book was not called Maiev, it was called Illidan,
right?
And it was about him, and her role was to be the antagonist. So what I focused on there was, her role as an antagonist. I mean, she might be a completely different person at home. I kind of doubt it, I have to say.
Right.
But her job in the book was to relentlessly hound Illidan in what I hoped was a plausible manner, and that is what she did, basically. I mean, at the time, I mean, in a book like that, where you're so focused on the central character and you're kind of trying to rehabilitate him in some ways, you kind of have to close down the other points of view in some ways. Although I hope there was some light shone on him from different angles.
I think you made her much less one-dimensional than in the games, at least. In the games, she would just say, we must destroy Illidan and then chase him into the portal, sort of thing. Let's see. The ending, and I won't get into too much with it, because in case people haven't read the book, but it was really memorable to me. I remember I think when everyone in the room showed up and Illidan was waiting for them, particularly the kind of spoilerish character that betrayed him once or twice.
Indeed.
Yeah, who I absolutely love, by the way, him.
Well, he was also intended to give you another point of view of Illidan. I think he's actually got the most reasonable point of view about Illidan.
He does. But I remember everyone ran into the room, and Illidan, his army was scattered, but he was still just scolded them. Illidan scolded him and was just kind of like, he caused everyone to have huge amount of fear of him in the room, even though he was the one that was being defeated. And then, yeah, obviously everyone had to fight to actually beat him because he was so powerful. I just remember that vividly, actually, just because how it seemed like he was still so convinced of himself that he could take on anyone in the room, and then the army outside as well.
Yeah, but partly that was just pure bravura, because he kind of knows everything's gone to pieces. He's kind of making his last stand, having done the best he can, with his master plan, basically. He's just trying to stay on his feet and maintain his dignity at that point, I think, basically, because he's about that. I mean, he's not going to admit, that he's been beaten. He's not, he's Illidan,
Right.
Yeah, and that's the Black Temple raid for you, so...
Did you have to replay a little bit of Frozen Throne to get some of the earlier parts of the book done?
Yeah, well, I actually made some mistakes about that, which were pointed out to me.
Really?
So, yeah, I did. And I also, my son and I actually went through Black Temple, just the two of us. We took our characters through Black Temple, which was really strange because I think we were level 100 at the time.
Oh, yeah.
We were level capped at the new level cap for whichever expansion it was before Legion.
Yeah, Mists of Pandaria.
Yeah, I kind of always block Pandaria out of my memories, it has to be said, because of pandas. But it's actually, I later discovered my panda prejudice was completely wrong. It's actually a great expansion. I mean, but at the time I skipped it because, pandas. That's all I have to say on that subject, pandas. But where was I before I started rambling on about pandas?
So rats are okay, but pandas are not.
Yeah, no. I mean, but it's more like the idea of pandas in World of Warcraft. That's
right.
Objected to, basically. I have nothing against actual pandas.
Right.
But where was I? There was some connection to your question, however tenuous.
No, the question was, did you play through a little bit of Frozen Throne or World of Warcraft to do the beginning of the book?
We did Black Temple multiple times. We actually did all of the dungeons in Outland with our level 100 characters, which was kind of a weird experience because you don't really aggro people when you're level 100 and they're 30 odd levels beneath you. So it's like they're all pretending you're not there. You're walking through Black Temple. Let's just pretend these level 100 guys are not here. Basically, is kind of what it feels like. Right. But we wandered through it, and actually I slaughtered a lot of very much lower level characters just to get a feel for it again. And we did the Black Temple raid to the two of us, basically. So that was all in the name of research. I even, God help me, I even took screenshots of the locations so I could write them down rather than rely on my memory.
I would do the same, honestly. Yeah.
We took multiple sort of touristy snapshots of the inside of Black Temple, wandering around, standing.
Kind of like you did when you went on vacation and would write.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of a vacation.
That's true.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, it really was.
Now let's see. Let's go on to your newer works. I understand that you've written the Grimaxe saga or parts of it, and you're in the middle of writing a new series now. Before we get to the new series, can you tell us about the Grimaxe saga? Because I only know a little bit from your blog, but I don't know too much about it.
Yeah, well, the Grimaxe saga is basically, it started off as a short story many years ago, as the Gotrek and Felix stuff did, and I really liked the character who's this sort of professional monster hunter, and basically it follows his adventures through this fantasy world, kind of quite dark fantasy world, it has to be said. So basically, sorry, my voice is starting to go here as well. Basically, it follows his adventures through the world. They were an attempt to sort of recreate the sword and sorcery stories I loved when I was a teenager. Like Conan and Elric and things like that. So I was trying to give them a kind of old school sword and sorcery vibe, basically, and I hope I succeeded. So they're sort of in some ways kind of monster of the week books. He goes to a place and he has an adventure in it, and he meets people and encounters things. I'm not really doing a good job of selling this, am I? But they were fun books to write, and they've got some good action sequences in them. I think they're pretty dark, and they're kind of gaming related, as most of my stuff is.
They darker than your Warhammer fantasy books?
In parts. I would say Illidan is probably the darkest book I've ever written in many ways. So they're not quite that dark. The central character is, if you imagine Conan's family had been wiped out when he was a kid, and he was brought up by warrior monks and trained to kill gods. That's basically who Cormac is. He's that's basically his job in some ways as well. So he's like a brutal swordsman equipped with all these tools for killing monsters, which he does. And he's wandered through 11 published novels and 5 published short stories now, I think, and I have a 12th book sitting on my hard drive waiting for me to get my act together and release it.
I thought that was just a trilogy, so I have a lot of reading to do though.
No, I mean there's 11 of them now. I mean the thing is they're collected into the first 6 are collected into 2 omnibuses, which you can pick up. I think the first one's called Flesh to Shadow. I haven't gotten round to putting a new cover and a new title on the second omnibus yet, so it's just called the Second Cormac Omnibus, which tells you something about my marketing skills there. But there's a fair number of books. There's a new short story due from Goodman Games, Tales of the Magician's Skull, the magazine that Joseph Goodman and Howard Andrew Jones put together. It's a sort of sword and sorcery magazine. There should be a new short story in that fairly soon. What else is there to say? It actually shares a world with the new series I've been writing, the Dragonborn books.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering.
Which kind of accidentally became bestsellers, which kind of shocked me, I must admit. They're books about a trainee wizard and the baby dragon he adopts, and they're somewhat atypical of my writing in many ways, as you would expect from that description.
Yes.
But I released the first book. I wrote the first draft 5 years ago, and I worked on it off and on for the past 5 years, 5 years, and eventually I released it. I'd been quite ill for a couple of years, so I didn't release anything. And I released this book. I forgot to even mention it on my Facebook page, and about a month later, I noticed there was a spike of hits on my blog coming in from, I think it was my Amazon page. So I checked my sales numbers, which I normally do about once a month, and I noticed that there had been a huge spike in sales, and I looked at it, and there it was in the young adult charts, sandwiched between the coming of age charts, sandwiched between Donna Tartt and Elena Ferrante, the Neapolitan stories that had just had a major HBO series made about them, and that kind of took me off guard, I have to say. Those books have done very well. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're not that atypical. They're about a boy wizard who's inducted into a mercenary company by a rather scary female wizard who he's apprenticed to, who have various adventures as they travel across the land. And he accidentally becomes the foster parent to this baby dragon, who he hatches again by accident. I mean, I'm rambling here because I actually don't know what to say about this.
No, I want you to, honestly, because I don't know anything.
Yeah,
No, you're fine.
sword and sorcery, because suddenly I discovered I was writing sort of young adult coming of age stories.
I was wondering, is it a young adult novel?
Or is it?
It wasn't actually intended to be. I mean, it grew out of the Cormac series. What happened was I was writing the Cormac books, and there was a bunch of things that I wanted to deal with, like in terms of world building. because that was one of the things I was actually doing, is I was building this vast, intricate world, one book at a time. And one of the things I wanted to address was magic. And given the fact that Cormac spends most of his time killing wizards, he probably wasn't the best man to explore that particular topic. So I thought I'd actually start writing the story of a magician in this fantasy world, because I thought it would also be a change of pace. I could look at the world from a different angle. I could show some point of view other than that of a professional monster hunter / wizard slayer. So I decided it would be the story of basically a first level D&D wizard.
Right.
Like somebody who's he's not even first level. He's in a funnel basically. Yeah, he's a 0 level D&D wizard, and it follows his very, very low-level adventures as he attempts to become a wizard, and that was my plan basically. And for whatever reason, it seems to have touched a chord.
Are there any physical copies out yet for that?
I'm afraid not. At some point, I may get my act together to produce some, but at the moment they're simply ebooks.
It's more a me thing, because I'm old-fashioned. I love buying regular books and reading them that way. I can't concentrate much on a Kindle for some reason. That's just...
I get it. I mean, many of my friends are the same way. I mean, I'm strangely the opposite.
Really?
Well, it's because I'm old again, I think. It's my eyesight is not so good. So I find that I get eye strain if I read, modern books, many of which have relatively small point sizes. And even if they have quite large point sizes, I still get eye strain. But on a Kindle, I can adjust the point size until, I'm good, basically. So I'd say 99.9% of the fiction I've read in the past 5 years has been on e-readers. I still read games in print. I think particularly art-heavy games. And I also like to be able to flick through books looking for rules and things like that. So, but most of the print books I've bought in the past 5 years have been games. Comics and graphic novels I still buy as well in physical form, but almost all the fiction I read is in ebook form. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Would you say that your newer trilogy, is it less grim than your Cormac saga or the others simply because it is young adult, or would you say that...
Well, like I said, I didn't actually set out to write a young adult book. It just seems to have gotten there, basically. I've had friends telling me that their kids are reading it, which is a bit alarming, given the fact that, in fact, in some ways, it's no less grim than my usual stuff.
Right.
What it has is it has a younger protagonist because he's an apprentice, basically. Right. But it's written. I make no concessions in terms of my attempts to portray the world realistically. Right. It's written in the first person, which I think gives it a different vibe.
Oh, okay.
It's more discursive.
How does magic work in the Cormac world?
Well, it was very ambiguous to begin with, because I got into sort of gaming back in the 70s. Yes, that's how old I am. Starting with D&D and sort of, I don't know if you're familiar with any of this stuff, but it was really, really gonzo stuff back in the day.
Oh, yes.
There was hard SF was mixed in with fantasy and so on. And the Cormac books kind of reflect that old school sensibility, basically. There are elements of science fiction in there. And at one stage I wanted to keep it ambiguous exactly how magical magic was. At one stage I even had a theory that it might have been a world saturated with nanomachines, and wizards were just people who could interface with them and thus affect reality on that basis. I have since moved away from that. So it's a bit more like sort of psionics in science fiction perhaps, but it varies from place to place in Cormac's world. You've got beings like the old ones who are like the sort of mortal gods that for a long time oppressed humanity, who are basically creatures of manifest magic, whatever it is, who can work at basically the same way as fish can swim in a sea, basically. It's just natural for them. For human beings in Cormac's world, it's a completely unnatural thing. Again, that's very old school, Lovecraftian, Call of Cthulhu. It's not the sort of thing that does good things to your sanity, or indeed, there's some elements of, old Woofrup in it as well, like corruption, people mutate and acquire stigmata and mutations. I mean, it's kind of like background radiation in some ways, like you can tap it, but it can also physically affect you. And a lot of the stuff that goes into being a magician is dealing with the feedback in some ways. It's making sure that you don't get mutated to the point where the Inquisition comes and kills you, or you go absolutely insane, and so on. And that's partially what these books explore, like how do you walk a path like that. So as you can see, it's not that child friendly in some ways, but
it sounds a bit like, not entirely of course, it sounds a little bit like the Warcraft Arcane, because it's not like an addictive drug that sort of kind of takes over and can really affect you in negative ways.
In some ways, I mean, it's not quite as pleasure center oriented, I think, as the sort of blood elf stuff. It's more like power is kind of addictive to the people who wield it, and the thing about Cormac's world is it's a world where people have had to live alongside magicians and monsters for a very long time and find ways of dealing with it. And one of the things about being a magician in that kind of world is you've got to find ways of dealing with people. Like it's the X-Men thing in some ways of being the hunted mutants, basically. Although they're a bit better integrated into society than the X-Men are. They actually do live alongside normal people, but they have. There's a lot of social pressure on them to behave well, because they'll get burnt at the stake if they don't. So if you're going to be an evil magician, you're going to have to do it in secret, or you're going to have to build yourself a big army of undead monsters or something like that, which is kind of hard to do in secret, particularly when there are people scouring the earth looking for people like you.
So it's sort of like Warhammer Fantasy a little bit in that regard, because magicians are seen very, very suspiciously, and like in little places that kids live, they might be burned at the stake maybe, and stuff like that. So okay.
I mean, it very much so. I mean, it's one of the sort of traumatic events that our hero in the books has actually, he has seen a witch burned back in the days before he was actually a wizard himself, and he was part of the crowd that was cheering it on, which he feels somewhat guilty about, it has to be said, and also somewhat terrified by. So there's that. I mean, but there's feedback between the two series, because I've kind of been writing them in tandem for quite a long time now. Like these books, the Wizard books, the Dragonbond saga only came out this year, but I've been working on them for a long time. The Cormac books, I was doing like a slow drip of releases for 7-8 years, and I'd actually been working on them for many years before that. Like the first story was published in 2004, I think, and I'd actually been working on a novel for quite a long time over that period, and I was working on them while I was working on my Warhammer stuff as well.
Wow!
So I mean, it's been a long time coming, this stuff. I mean, I'm really glad for things like the Kindle, because it's given me an opportunity to bring it out there. I mean, the thing about the Cormac books is that they were very much kind of like 1970s old school pulp sword and sorcery, the sort of stuff I absolutely loved when I was growing up. The thing is, I don't think there's a huge audience for that. I mean, there's a very hardcore dedicated audience, thank you, for it, but I don't think there's a huge mass market audience for that. And normal publishers know this, so they were a really hard sell. Like no mainstream publisher was ever going to publish the Cormac books, so I did it myself, which is how I got into the whole indie publishing scene, basically. And I'm really glad I did, because it was a great experience, and I think it's also helped create the world for the Dragonbond books, which like I said, have done really well, and and I also think possibly the coming of age thing means that there's a much larger audience there, basically, let me rephrase that, a much larger potential audience there. I mean, people who grew up reading, the Sphere reprints of Conan in the 60s and 70s, there are less of us now than there used to be. It's the tactful way of putting that. Whereas, I think coming of age and young adult is still very much, a popular genre, basically. So.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other? Let's see. There's likely not, since it's based on a lot of pulp work, which I actually love. But are there any other? Are there any other kind of Tolkien-esque races in that universe, or is it?
Yeah, well, the Cormac world is in many ways. It was me rationalizing my old school Dungeons and Dragons love. It was like there are some interesting takes on dwarves, I think, and elves. The elves are particularly weird and scary. They kind of live in symbiosis with their trees and have a hive mind that they can kind of switch on and off using their forests as kind of relays, basically, because some of their trees are these very sentient, ancient. Well, the forests are actually sentient, and they're kind of the mobile guardians of it. They're kind of, they exist in symbiosis. They're kind of more human when they're not connected to the switchboard, as it were. But once they're there, like if you meet a troop of elves who are kind of in war mode, all of them will follow you. They'll all look at you and their heads will track you as you move, like a whole group. So there's a scene where Cormac confronts like 20 of them, and all their heads are tracking him in exact sync as he's walking, which is just weird, basically. And it was an image that I thought was quite understated, but quite powerful, and I think it gets across how different they are. The dwarves were kind of the toolmaker race of the old ones who rebelled against them and who now provide Cormac's order with their magic god killing and demon killing and everything, other magic killing weapons, basically. But they're kind of, there's a sequence which is like this vast dungeon. I think it's in Taker of Skulls, which might be the fifth book, which is the fifth book. Where there's a sort of Moria-esque, vast, abandoned, underground dwarven city, which is kind of Moria meets Red Nails. I don't know if you're familiar with the Conan story, Red Nails. Conan visits this lost city, which has basically been sealed off from the rest of the world for hundreds of years, and there's these two factions are engaged in this genocidal war against each other. They can't get out, they're just trapped in this city that's one vast building, and that's kind of the plot of Taker of Skulls, actually, which I've just given away. But it's also, there was actually an attempt to quite seriously look at a dungeoneering culture. There's kind of a set of Gold Rush style camps outside this lost city where adventurers are coming in to like kind of loot the city, which was kind of based on Deadwood amongst other things. So I was trying to rationalize kind of lots of classic fantasy gaming tropes in some ways, and also do pulp, sword and sorcery at the same time. I mean, it was a lot of fun to do.
I'm sort of doing that myself currently, so I know exactly how difficult that can be sometimes. But let's see here. All right, I do know some Conan stories. I didn't know that one particularly, but I kind of want to read that one and the Cormac Saga now a little bit. I was gonna buy a Conan anthology when I was in Alaska, but I decided I should save my money for other things.
No, you can't go wrong buying a Conan anthology. You really can't. There's one that has all of Robert E. Howard's Conan stories collected together. It's sitting on my shelf here.
Really?
Let me just. Sorry, I've got these wired headphones on, so I probably can't reach my bookshelf because it's in. I have to leave my office here and look into the bedroom. It's called The Complete Chronicles of Conan, and well worth the money. It may be available as an ebook, but it's certainly available as a hardback. It collects all of his story, all of the Robert E. Howard Conan stories together, and it's a wonderful book, containing some of my favourite fiction, which was hugely influential on my own writing, I have to say.
I honestly plan on reading it. Honestly, it's just that with this podcast, I'm gonna have to read a lot of people's works over the course.
Yeah, indeed.
So I thought, like, I should probably wait until little bit later. But I am having there's a huge book sale in my town this weekend, so I might actually get it if it's there.
Yeah, I genuinely would recommend it. Like, you really can't go wrong. There are some great short stories in there. And as an action writer, he's never been surpassed. I used to break down his action scenes to see how you would write them. It's how I learned to write an action scene, was breaking down Robert E. Howard's action scenes. And I'm still not as good as he was, even though I've studied his work for 40-odd years now.
I feel the same way with R.A. Salvatore's work with his Dungeons & Dragons books, honestly.
Yeah.
Have you read any of it? Sorry.
Yeah, I've read the first 3 Drizzt books. They're also on my shelf here, actually, in hardback. So I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly, but...
Drizzt, yeah.
Yep.
I just did a episode of another podcast talking about it, because I think I've read all of his work 3 times over, so I completely understand how good that is. Let me see here. All right, that is... Honestly, I went past my regular questions a while ago.
Okay.
Well, I'm a huge fan of yours, so I was really interested about your work, to be honest. Let's see. How can I and other people get your Cormac novels? It's on Amazon? Is it on your...
I think the first 6 are available as paperbacks on Amazon. You can even order them from your local bookstore, but you'd have to order them since they're print on demand. They're all available on the Kindle, and on iBooks, and on Google Play, and Barnes & Noble's Nook, and on Kobo. I mean, I think you can find them on any e-reader that you want to find them on. You can find... the Dragonborn books there as well.
Okay.
I'm rambling a bit now.
Oh, you're okay. All right, well, thank you so much for coming on, because, like I said, I owe you quite a bit, even before this podcast, because your writing is really influential on my writing, to be honest. So...
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's good to hear.
All right, well,
legacy.
I don't know if I'm quite that good yet, but I've been writing for about 10 years, but at the same time, I'm 28 years old, if that tells you anything.
Well, it's actually, I think that was when I sold the first Gotrek story.
Really?
Yep. I don't think I had a novel out till I was about 40, to be honest. So, which again tells you how old I am. It can be a long haul.
That tells you how young I am, because I think I read Gotrek and Felix when I was 13. It was the first time I read it.
Oh my God! No, I really do feel old. Yeah, but
thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, appreciate that. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the interview, and this is Magic Rings and Laser Beams.